This is Carissa Miller with Lula Pottery for your ears. Last visit, I talked about different learning styles and throwing. I don't work well in person in a group, mainly for sensory reasons, but I do learn best by watching, and so found myself well suited to a YouTube pottery education. I'm definitely not going to attempt an auditory step-by-step course on throwing, but I do have some things to say about how we use our bodies in pottery, and that's what this episode will get into. In my mind, this has two parts, both how to get into and out of machine mode. I think we must necessarily consider our bodies as machine-like in order to become proficient on the wheel, but conversely, we also have to know how to celebrate our inherent humanness by letting go of perfectionism that we might end up with art. My middle-aged autism revelation was a major event that after several years is ongoing and far from over. Every day I have thoughts and interactions that ring the, "Oh, that's why I'm like this," bell. Between re-reviewing my 40-odd previous years when I was convinced I was somehow broken or wrong, and catching myself in real-time circumstances with the knowledge that I am only different in a way that can be documented and explained within the science of neurodivergent study, I am ahawing right, left, and backwards. The "why am I like this" of my mind has been first and foremost how I think and see and feel the world. So much so that I sort of forgot that all this wiring is also in charge of a body. But within this last year, especially as I expand my bandwidth to encompass my ooey gooey meat sack thrown over bones, I have become equally as enthralled with all that neurodivergence has to offer by way of explanation about my body. And I'm beginning to grasp why having a body has always felt somewhat unnatural, uncomfortable, counterintuitive, and more effortful to me than others. For instance, I've recently learned that I use the wrong muscles to breathe. I constantly have my trapezius muscles engaged, which are meant for emergencies. I downloaded an anatomy app that I will link in the description that is for med students, and I consult it more often than I feel I should need to every time I need a refresher on the shape and range of motions of the diaphragm. When I practice mindful breathing and rib expansion, I have to remind myself almost every time that the in-breath is pulling air down into my body via negative pressure of the diaphragm as it lowers and flattens. I think my whole life I've equated an in-breath with up because of the direction of the nostrils. They're pointed down and they have to take air up into the nasal passage, so the air is technically initially moving up. Hence my stupid shoulders raising and staying there and causing all sorts of tightening and pain. I assumed breathing properly was a given. It's not. I pause here to wonder how much I want to discuss pooping. I've had that pretty backwards too, and as far as I'm concerned, no one should have ever equated pooping or having a baby with pushing or bearing down. In short, From my new understanding, the expansion of the rib cage that comes with the contraction of the diaphragm is linked to extension and lengthening of the pelvic floor, an opening up, if you will, allowing anything that might be passing along the digestive tract the ability to move along. And the out breath, a release of the diaphragm and a synchronous contraction of the pelvic floor, pushes air out of the lungs and the what have you out of the down below. I am moved to call to mind toy finger handcuffs. In breath, elongation and movement. Out breath, contraction and release of fingers. So many problems with this analogy. Suffice it to say, if you're a problem pooper, look this up, and I will link some of my favorite posture, pelvic floor, and breathwork therapists of Instagram here as well. Shouldn't all of this be taught in kindergarten? I'm so serious. I have a hard time recalling what useful things I learned in school, and this is so valuable. I feel foolish and robbed to have just learned basic body mechanics in my 40s. I will get to the pottery soon. But first, I don't think I've been swallowing properly all this time either. I believe I have discovered that my tongue thrusts forward and that it is meant to do the snake upward and back toward the throat. And you know that myofunctional biomechanics are linked to pelvic floor function, as are the biomechanics of your feet. Fascia, fascia, fascia. In my introduction episode, I made fun of how I struggle with intero and proprioception, internal body cues, and awareness of the body in space, respectively. Specifically, the phenomenon of not knowing what face I'm making most of the time, or recognizing and responding to such things as hunger cues in a timely manner, and running into things a lot, rendering many bumps and bruises, and not properly gauging grip strength. Again, all autistic things and all related. And still the pottery is coming. Perhaps you've always known how to breathe and relate not at all to any of these so far described experiences. Please then consider the aforementioned educational with regards to the autistic community, with the caveat, as always, that autistic traits are simply human traits experienced at an extreme degree, and that every single autistic person and experience is approximately 7,000% unique. I am betting, however, that more likely you fall among the heavily numbered neurodivergent artist population, and you feel in some way described in the previous minutes of explanations. Either way, we all have bodies, comfortable and in control of them to varying degrees. I am able to work mine best when movements are very specifically described and prescribed. My early prescription was for classical ballet. I think that may be how I didn't notice for so long that I wasn't moving in all the other ways of life quite properly. Ballet also disguised me as graceful well into adulthood, and also made me clench my butt cheeks and walk around with my toes turned out. Now I'm very concerned with teaching myself not to do either of those things, as well as all that I have outlined in the beginning of this episode. The body mechanics of a ballerina are not well suited to life at large. And here comes the pottery. Pottery has specific moves. The clay must be moved according to the laws of physics, but there are endless different ways to organize your body in order to execute them. I'm not sure I realized this until just now, but when I am working out a new form, I think about the clay moving by itself. I visualize a final shape and deconstruct it into the path it must follow from its original lump. I think about the motion of it, the lift and expansion, the angles, curves, contraction, the movements of my hand, and how to position them, where they apply pressure, and how it's just facilitation at the end when I'm ready to attempt construction. These considerations, of course, happen without much conscious thought after enough practice. But any potter who has a vision or, for example, is examining someone else's work is constantly going through this deconstruction process. How was this done? How do I do this? Teaching your body the moves for the pottery is fumbling and awkward, even when you're practiced. Getting used to a new form, I try all kinds of different approaches with my hand tools. Tool hands. Once I can make my hands make the clay do what I want, then there's the consideration of doing those moves healthfully so that they may be done for a significant period of time without pain. And then there's also the concern for being able to do the moves the most efficient and exactly. If you don't connect your hands to your arms and your core and your pelvic floor and your feet, you're in trouble long term. This fact is something I have to bring forward into my consciousness multiple times during a throwing session, or I will catch myself trying to do it all with the tortured little muscles of just my hands. My hands are not isolated. They are part of my body. My body is a machine. Feet grounded, diaphragm engaged, intake breath, activate core. My long bones are steel rods. My joints are fulcrums. Energy travels through me and into the clay. I am an engine. In my mind's eye, as I describe this, I see a bare human skeleton sitting at the wheel. And then I begin to add layers and parts to it, like with my anatomy app. And the bones are interchangeable with steel and machine parts so that the body fills with levers and pulleys and gears as muscles and tendons and ligaments. And when I get to the exterior casing, I remember to lubricate the crap out of it because pottery really dries out your skin. It helps me immensely to think about my body as a machine and work towards muscle memory, like components on a fixed track of movement, repeating and repeating. The steps in the process is like programmed choreography, not less for the fact that it triggers relaxation for me. When I get so practiced on a form that my body acts like a finely tuned machine, my mind is no longer required. And this is a big deal because my mind hardly ever gets to go offline. I also love an assembly line. The orderliness and the efficiency. So I like to picture my body as a machine in a factory, and my shelves are the conveyor belt piling up new work, and at some point the theme song to Laverne and Shirley starts playing. I wish I could show you how I'm sitting right now. I'm sprawled out with my limbs at odd angles as though I had landed here from a 10-story drop. I put myself into this position. I am not comfortable. This is naturally how I move, and I have to think about sitting properly. My joints are hypermobile, and for you neurodivergents listening along, I'm going to add this bit in because It's a very common thing for us to have hypermobility, something like 80%, depending on the study you read, and it has been tricky for me to grasp. Hyperextension, I think, is what most people think of when a knee or an elbow bends beyond straight, the opposite way. And that is one manifestation of hypermobile joints. Hypermobile joints have more play or laxity, wiggle room than typical joints, which poses an entirely new set of considerations when learning how to move and hold your body. Again, I think this would be a good place for me to put some links to people that I learn and study from on this topic. Besides how my body mechanics apply to my work as a potter, I've taken special interest in body alignment and range of motion and posture, etc., especially in the last couple of years, let's say, because I'm 45 and really, if you don't use it, you lose it. I like to climb trees and crawl around on the floor, and I know my spirit is always going to be playful. I'm very interested in making sure that my body can play along as long as possible. Life is taxing. Pottery is extra. Be mindful that you don't wear out your parts prematurely. Do your stretches and strength training and mind your posture. This is where I tell you that I have my wheel raised up, not quite to standing height, and I sit on an adjustable height bar type stool and operate my pedal with my arm so that both my feet can sit flat on the floor. This is going to be a two-parter because I want to spend an equal amount of time on the part that I haven't gotten to yet, and that is how we balance the idea of machine type line production using our bodies with the fact that our bodies have limitations, and how we can see these limitations not as lacking perfection, but as the endearing quality of humanness that is essential to art. Until next time, thank you for being here. Try not to make ugly pots, and let's do this again.